Hello fellow Zelda fans, my name is Brascoin and welcome back to my channel for this first 4th of July video special. After doing a quick YouTube search and coming back with a whole plethora of top 5 videos ranking the games as a whole, I wanted to take some time and really narrow in on specific aspects of each game. Since it's the 4th of July and in America it's a day of celebrating our freedom, I decided to rank the titles of our favorite series based solely upon which game gives the player the most freedom to complete the story. Limiting this to the top 5 titles, the ones not mentioned have already been weeded out. I also reached out to fellow content creators such as Nehru, the Tyler Townsend, and Legend Zone to get their input on this list with some pretty similar ideas and opinions, as well as some very interesting takes, as sheer combination orders of dungeon isn't entirely indicative of how free a game feels, and thereby is overall feel of the world, and side quest opportunities will be taken into consideration while evaluating these titles. Introductions out of the way, let's dive into the list with number 5. The Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time. This is the first installment in which the series is played in 3D. This Zelda game follows the formula set up by its predecessor, A Link to the Past, and with that came a very set story and order in which to do the dungeons. At least it did at first glance. Upon further inspection, it is actually quite an open world if you know how to do it. That being said, the only true requirements are 1. The Deku Tree must be completed first. 2. All 3 child dungeons must be completed before going to the adult timeline. 3. Ganon's castle is obviously last. 4. The Forest Temple, Water Temple, and Fire Temples must be complete in order to access the Shadow Temple. And 5. The Water Temple must be complete before starting the Spirit Temple. That being said, after completing inside the Deku Tree, Dodongo's Cavern and Zora's Domain can be completed in any order. This gives us 2 possible outcomes for the child portion of the game. We'll use that information a little bit later. Into the adult portion of the game, the Forest Temple does have to be completed before the Spirit Temple due to needing to return to the past for a portion of the Spirit Temple. This leaves only 13 possible orders in which these 5 temples can be completed. Multiply that by the 2 orders we talked about from the child portion of the game, and we get a whopping total of 26 orders that these dungeons can be completed in. Overall, the world of Ocarina of Time is a lot smaller than some of the other games, with notable side quests including the heart pieces, the mask sales, and the item trading sequence for the Big Goron sword. While it does have a decent variety of ways in which you can beat the dungeons, it is still pretty low on this list due to lacking other significant side quests to complete. Number 4. The Legend of Zelda. A shocking result for many Zelda fans, I'm sure, but this game actually has way more freedom when it comes to completing the dungeons than many would initially think. With a total of 9 dungeons to complete, there are of course a few rules. Level 1 must be completed before level 6. Level 2 can be completed in any order except for the final dungeon. Level 3 must be completed before level 4, and level 4 must be completed before levels 5 and 6. Level 5 must be completed before level 7. Level 8 can be completed in any order except for the final dungeon. Level 9, the final dungeon, must be completed last. To do the math for this example, we must first find every order of combinations that actually meet this rule. Luckily, this had already been done for me by GameFAQs user Toad004. A link to their original post will be in the description. The list will be on the screen for a total of 12 different combinations. We can add in level 9 at the end if we really want to, but the number of combinations will remain the same. Now, since level 2 and 8 can go literally anywhere before level 9, we multiply the original 12 scenarios, which consists of levels 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, for a total of 6 digits by 7, because there are now 7 places that level 2 can go in before level 9, for a new total of 84 different scenarios. Next, we add in level 8 by multiplying the new total of 84 scenarios with 7 total digits by the number 8, because there will now be 8 places in which we can place level 8 before completing level 9. This gives us a brand new final total of 672 different combinations for the way in which we can conquer these dungeons. Considering that this was the first game in the series, that is quite a feat to accomplish. Then again, It was before the established formula of the series, setting forth a completely linear story progression. In fact, this game's entire premise was adventure and exploration. Shigeru Miyamoto's main purpose in creating the game was to reimagine the explorations he would often go on around his hometown as a young man growing up. This game does a pretty decent job of capturing that feeling of adventure with loads of interesting locales to find for a pretty basic 2D game. Before I get into it, Position 3 and 2 were actually hard to place due to the two different ranking systems used for defining the feeling of freedom we have while playing each of these games. But ultimately, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds takes Position 3 due to the next entry scoring a bit higher more consistently. A Link Between Worlds is truly an inspiration in choices for the Zelda series, and it was a great test to see what players would do with their newfound freedom. In this installment of the series, we have a total of 12 unique dungeons to conquer in our journey to save Hyrule and subsequently Lorule. There are two distinct sections of this game representing the standard Zelda formula. The rules for this game go as follows. First 4 dungeons must be done before continuing to Lorule, where we complete the rest. Eastern Palace must be the first dungeon completed. Hyrule Castle must be done 4th. Thief's Hideout must be done before Desert Palace. Lorule Castle is the last dungeon, so we know nothing can come after it. Now that we got the rules out of the way, it is time to figure out the math for this one. In this, we have 5 set dungeons and 7 dungeons that we can switch up, with 2 of those being locked in the first area. The Tower of Hera and the House of Gales are 2 interchangeable dungeons that must be completed before journeying to Lorule. This gives us a total of 2 combinations of the dungeons for the first area. We will use that information a little bit later. The next area has 2 dungeons that must be done in a specific order, so we will place them together. Next, we will add the remaining 5 dungeons. For the first dungeon, there will be a total of 3 possible places to insert this dungeon. For the second, there will be a total of 4 places. There will be 5 places for the third dungeon, 6 places for the 4th dungeon, and 7 places for the 5th dungeon, giving us an equation that looks like this. 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7 for the total combinations of dungeons in the second portion of the game, multiplied by 2 to account for the 2 outcomes from the first part of the game. This gives the player a total of 5,040 different ways to complete all of the dungeons how they see fit. This gives the player the most pathways to beat the game so far, and it is all owed to the game mechanic of item renting. Instead of relying on an item attained from a previous dungeon to get to the next one, the player can simply rent an item from Ravio and go to almost any dungeon in any order, with the exception of Desert Palace, which needs the item from the Thief's Hideout to enter. This game has no doubt inspired the style of future Zelda games to come. Unfortunately, I failed to realize this lack of linearity in my first playthrough of the game, but the other content creators I consulted with have affirmed quite unanimously that this game deserves its spot on this list. Number 2. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. In this entry, we find ourselves with the least amount of options for completing the dungeon in our chosen order. With the first 5 dungeons being in a set order, it only allows the player to choose in which order to take on the 6th dungeon and the 7th dungeon before entering Ganon's Tower. The redeeming quality here is that the mandatory collection of the 8 Triforce shards scattered across the sea can be done in almost any order. 4 of the Triforce shards can be found in any order, while 2 of the Triforce shards are locked behind the Wind Temple, with the remaining 2 locked behind completing the Earth Temple. In order to keep the math as simple as possible, I input the 6 variables consisting of the Wind and Earth Temple and the 4 shards into a program that combined them in every possible order with an output of 720 possibilities. After deleting all of the possibilities that did not follow the rules, I got a total of 82. Keeping 82 aside for later, I believe the next step would be to fill in the other 4 Triforce shards. As there were 6 events to account for already, the first shard would have 7 places in which to go, the second would have 8, the third would have 9, and the fourth would have 10. Giving us an equation that looks something like this: 82 times 7 times 8 times 9 times 10, for a total of 413,280 event possibilities. Please, if my math is somehow wrong, let me know in the comments below, but don't be rude about it. Math is far from a strength for me, and pending I didn't accidentally delete a permutation that still meets the rules, it should be accurate enough. All the number crunching aside, the Wind Waker also offers us 7 fantastic dungeons, an entire sea to explore filled with islands to discover, treasure to find, mysteries to seek, and people to investigate. Spread this throughout your journey and you have a significant amount of freedom to explore the world as you see fit, despite seemingly linear structure of the story. Before getting into the number 1 position, we of course have 2 honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1 was brought to me by fellow content creator Legend Zone. When I asked them what 5 games they would choose, they placed both of the Oracle games on their list as a single entry. The reason for which was, quote, for the varying story and options depending on the order you play them, end quote. For those who aren't familiar with the 2 games, the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons are 2 separate games that can be completed in any order. However, you can connect the games together for a combined ending, essentially doubling any order you may be able to complete the dungeons in within each game, as you can beat one game before the other, and vice versa. This mechanic has netted the Oracle games an honorary mention. Honorary mention number 2 was, of course, Majora's Mask, nominated by me as well as another content creator. While the dungeons may make the game extremely linear feeling with only one order in which to complete them, the side quest game is on point. With 20 additional side quests filled with developed characters, interesting mechanics, and a whole lot of collectibles, this helps the world to not feel so small as some of the other games in the franchise. Honorable mentions out of the way, topping the list at number 1, the game in which the player has the most freedom to explore the world, build the adventure, and play their way is the game that we knew would be at the top all along, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. This entry's placement in this spot was simply unanimous, to say the least. With only 4 shrines required to beat the game, you can do them in any order and head immediately to Hyrule Castle to finish the game. Add to that the other 116 shrines, 4 additional Divine Beasts, with only 2 shrines being locked behind the completion of a Divine Beast in order to complete all 120. The math for this is way beyond my skill level, so I'm not going to attempt to do it realistically, because regardless of how you do it, the combinations will be more astronomical than the patterns on the walls of the Sheikah shrines, so I'm not going to be too bothered by it. The equation, at the very minimum, looks a little bit like this. We have the 24 combinations of shrines to get off the Great Plateau, plus another 120 shrine/divine beasts to accomplish, giving us a rough ballpark estimate of 24 times 120 factorial. The total for this is 1.605481e raised to the 200th power. Needless to say, that number is gargantuan, and that's only covering the shrines and divine beasts. With more than 70 optional side quests, some of which involve completing a shrine, armor to find, upgrades to do, compendiums to fill, monsters to hunt, memories to gather, and heart increases as well as stamina increases, and let's not forget the 900 freaking Korok seeds we have to find. This game has a gigantic world full of everything a player could possibly want to do except for fishing, crafting items, and petting the doggos. All of that being said, there is one game that could possibly top Breath of the Wild in its ambition, in its freedom for the players to choose how to go about completing the game, and that is, of course, Breath of the Wild 2 when it comes out. This has been my top 5 Zelda games that offer the player the most freedom over how to beat the game. Thank you all so much for watching. If you were entertained by this in any way, consider slapping the subscribe button for more of my content, if not for all of the math that I just had to do for the completion of this video. I would like to reach 1,000 subscribers so that I can get the community tab of my channel so that I can host better giveaways for you guys, my viewers. I would like to give away my Zelda Loftwing amiibo I have shipping to my house on July 16th, and if I can get the community tab by then, I would love to host that giveaway. Thank you all so much for watching once again, and I will catch you all in another video.